Hey, what's going on, guys? This is AndrewChicken, and welcome back to another video. They just released a brand new update for Deadlock with a metric crap ton of tweaks to the item store, as well as a couple of other general things and some hero changes as well. So, I'm going to be going through all the important stuff in the patch notes here if you want to follow along. A link will be in the description, and with all that being said, let's get started. First of all, we have a couple of map changes. These are to the outer lane base guardians over here, and just the general layout of this part of the map. So the first change you can already see is they moved these base guardians down to the lower set of stairs instead of having them be all the way up here underneath the bridge. So this should make it a little bit easier to actually push up into the base. And you'll notice there's also now a door here that connects it to this sort of secret room in here, so you can now go from the side lanes to the middle lanes and also up to this zip line, which allows you to reach the upper platforms. And they also changed the shape of the bridge, apparently. I can't honestly tell what they did here, but it's listed in the patch notes. The main thing is, of course, there is this connector, and there is also these base guardians now. They've also done some general changes to how the map objectives work. First up, probably the most important change, you can now shoot the shrines from 7 meters farther out now, meaning if you're standing right about here-ish, you are able to hit this shrine. So 7 meters is a pretty big deal, and I think this is a justified change considering how they locked away these shrines and these cubbies now. It's a bit harder to reach them, and so you need to be able to hit them from a bit farther away. They've also done a number of other different things. They increased all walker HP by 10%. It's a little bit too easy to split push this patch, so I understand why they did that. Walker resistance versus troops reaches minus 40% at 20 minutes instead of 16 minutes, so you're less likely to lose a walker to minions in the earlier part of the game. They have reduced, however, the objective spirit resistance from 50% to 40%. So if you're doing spirit damage to these objectives, it'll be slightly more effective, although I don't have any items, so this is useless. They have also changed troopers to now have 50% resistances when they are in the base. So troopers are going to be much bigger of a deal. You're going to want to look to control those, because if left unchecked, they will be quite tanky, and they will just bulldoze through your base guardians and your shrines, and it's going to be a very bad time. They've also changed some soul numbers around, so the 2-hero soul split ratio is now 65%, up from 60%. So in the early lane, if it's just you and your lane partner on lane, you will be getting more souls now, which is nice. And they've also increased the hero kill bounty from starting at 175 up to 1600 to now starting at 250 and ramping up to 1800. I think this will be a very prevalent, especially in the early game. It means that if you go for a kill, you're going to get a lot more extra souls, and that can really ramp up and escalate quickly. I'm going to put the last two general changes up on the screen here. They aren't super crazy important, but I just wanted you to be able to read them while I tell you that if you've been enjoying the content recently, all the crazy build showcases, all the patch coverage, then please consider subscribing. It's a free way to support the channel, and it helps you stay up to date on all my latest videos. But with that being said, let's move on and talk about hero changes now. So we have a bunch of changes for a bunch of different heroes here, ranging from rather small changes to decently sized changes. First of all, pretty small one, Abrams' move speed has been reduced from 6.8 to 6.5, so a little bit slower now, harder for him to keep pace and keep punching those people. Up next we have Dynamo, and his tier 3 on the rejuvenating aura has been nerfed from 3% down to 2.5%. Dynamo has been a beast this patch, and I guess they decided that his max healing per second when stacked with healing tempo, which is an utterly busted item on supports, was just a little bit too much, so they have nerfed that. Next up we have Kelvin, who received a rather interesting change. His stamina cooldown has been increased from 5 seconds to 6 seconds. I didn't even know this was a number that was different for every hero, but yeah, Kelvin regenerates his stamina slower now. The more you know. Lady Geist is receiving more nerfs, to no one's surprise. She's pretty darn strong. So the health per boon, that is of course the health scaling as you level up, has been decreased from 86 to 82. That's a pretty substantial nerf, actually. Essence Bomb's self-damage spirit scaling is increased from 1.3 to 1.6, so as you level up your spirit damage, you're going to be dealing way more damage to yourself now. And they also reduced the cast range of Life Drain from 20 meters down to 18 meters. So a lot harder harder to play Lady Geist, and they're really clamping down on how much she's able to get away with when it comes to survivability. McGinnis is getting a nerf, and it actually makes sense? What world are we living in? Wait, McGinnis is strong? What? Yeah, McGinnis' Medicinal Spectre Tier 3 has been reduced from 3.5 down to 3% max health regen per second, in a similar vein to Dynamo. Once again, McGinnis this patch has been pretty scary with the healing tempo item, which is a very, very powerful item indeed, and so they have kind of nerfed that interaction by reducing the amount of healing she gets on this ability. Shiv is receiving more nerfs. I guess Valve took a look at my Immortal Shiv build and decided, nah, that's too much, because they reduced his move speed from 7 down to 6.8, they reduced his health per boon from 81 down to 77, that's pretty big, and they also reduced his gun damage even more from 4.95 down to 4.6 base gun damage, which that is also pretty crazy. So yeah, bunch of nerfs to Shiv, and again, no one's probably too surprised. Vyper is also getting some nerfs, and I think she's getting the biggest health nerf out of all of them, because first up, her health per boon has been reduced from 64 down to 53. That is 11 health per boon, just gone. That's actually pretty darn big. And she also has minus 20% crit bonus scale like Kelvin, meaning that she gets less critical damage than other characters would normally get. So she shoots the head, and she still gets bonus damage, just not as much bonus damage as someone like Hayes. So that's pretty rough for her. And on top of that, they have nerfed the bullet damage growth from 0.33 to 0.28, and this is how much bullet damage you get for every power increase. So yeah, a lot of nerfs to Vyper, but her gun damage has been utterly ridiculous, especially with some items like armor-piercing rounds. So yeah, definitely saw some stuff like this coming. After that, we have Warden, and he's getting a bit of a power shift to the Last Stand. Not a direct nerf, just a power shift. So, the Tier 2 has reduced scaling from 70 DPS down to 60 DPS, and that is the Tier 2 upgrade here for Last Stand. However, they have increased the Spirit power scaling from 1.3 to 1.4. So, less damage from the direct Tier 2 upgrade, but if you scale Spirit power, that is stronger on Last Stand. Wraith is also getting a health nerf per boon, down from 65 to 57, and the full auto Tier 2 Spirit damage has been reduced from 5 down to 4, which this synergized, of course, really well with Mercurial Magnums, so yeah, no surprises here to see Wraith also get a few nerfs. And finally, Yamato. Crimson Slash Tier 2 heal has been reduced from 8% down to 6%. Honestly, fair. I feel like Yamato's been disgusting recently, and part of the reason is because of her ridiculous self-sustain. So yeah, bit of a nerf to Crimson Slash, and yeah, that's the last hero change. Now let's talk about items. This is where the patch gets really just thick. There's so many changes here, so I'm gonna try and read through and cover the most important ones here. So first up, let's talk about weapon items, starting with the Tier 1 items. We have some buffs and some nerfs here. Close Quarters gives more melee resist, up to 20% now from 15. Extended Magazine gives 30% max ammo, up from 25. That is pretty nice. Headshot Booster, however, has been nerfed. The cooldown has been increased from 6 seconds up to 8 seconds. This was a really powerful item, so makes sense why they've nerfed that. Monster Rounds also receiving a tiny nerf. The out-of-combat regen has been reduced down to just 1. Previously it was 1.5. Restorative Shot has also received a couple of buffs. They have reduced the cooldown from 7 seconds to 6 seconds, and they increased the weapon damage bonus from 6% up to 8%. I felt like this wasn't really as good as some of the other options. You know, extra regen, early lane sustain, upgrades into healing booster and healing tempo, really good on a lot of characters. Healing Ride if you're playing a support, obviously pretty good, and you can also use it on your lane partner so they don't have to buy regen. Melee Lifesteal is a classic, and of course we have the new Mystic regeneration, which is also pretty cool. So yeah, I guess this definitely makes a lot of sense. Next, we have the Tier 2 items, and there are some pretty interesting changes in here. Up first, Active Reload apparently would go on cooldown even if it didn't trigger. That was a bit of an oversight, so they have fixed that. It should now only go on cooldown if you actually activate the ability. Next up, Backstabber getting a very interesting nerf. It now only procs if you're within 25 meters of the target, so you actually have to be somewhat up close now. Previously, you could actually pretty much just snipe people with this item. As long as their back was turned, you were good. So that is a pretty interesting change. Still probably going to be a pretty solid item, though. Fleetfoot is getting another cooldown buff. I think it got one in the previous update, and now it's going from 11 seconds down to 10 seconds. They really want people using Fleetfoot now. Intensifying Magazine has received a bit of a needed buff. The weapon damage has gone up to 45% now at max. Previously it was 40%. I've thought this item was a bit underwhelming ever since they nerfed it from a tier 3 down to a tier 2. So yeah, that is pretty cool. Long range as well, by the way, this is kind of crazy. They buffed long range from 35% up to 40%, more weapon damage. Valve, what are we doing? I thought this item was already pretty good, but I guess it's even better now. Melee charge, however, has been nerfed from 30% bonus heavy damage down to 25%. Punch builds have been pretty good, so I guess it makes sense that this is being nerfed. Slowing bullets also has had its dash distance scaling reduced from 25% down to 20%. So yeah, a little bit less potent when it comes to the dashes now. Also, I just noticed Split Shot has a new icon. They didn't change this item at all, they just changed how it looks. So yeah, well, they thought they could sneak that past me. Nuh-uh, Valve. My eyes are too keen, too sharpshooter. I don't know what I'm saying. Titanic Magazine has received a nerf, not to the max ammo thankfully, just the weapon damage has gone down from 15 to 12%. And finally, to round things off, Weakening Headshot actually got a pretty solid buff. 25 extra bonus health, from 50 up to 75. This is already, I think, a pretty good item, because it reduces their bullet resist and builds into Crippling Headshot, and now that extra health just makes it even more enticing. Let's take a look at the tier 3 items now. There are still some pretty interesting changes in here. Alchemical Fire actually got a pretty sizable buff. The Spirit Power scaling has been increased from 0.056 to 0.07. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but it does mean that the bullet resist and the damage per second you're going to get are going to be drastically improved. Berserker received a slight nerf to the bullet resist, 18 down to 16%. Not too big of a deal. Burst Fire has received 4 different changes. Let's read through them. First of all, this gives 10% passive fire rate increase now regardless of whether you hit an enemy or not, and that's been shifted down from the... This is called a passive, but it's really more of an active because it just, it triggers when you hit an enemy hero, so I consider passive stats to be like the slide distance and the fire rate. That's beside the point. Regardless, the 45% that you would get when hitting an enemy hero has gone down to 35% to compensate for the 10% now being a true passive buff. They have also reduced the cooldown from 8 seconds to 7 seconds, or at least they have according to the patch notes. However, in-game here it still looks like it's 8 seconds, so that's a little strange. But they have also reduced the duration from 4 seconds down to 3.5 seconds, and it looks like that made it in. So in that sense, maybe the uptime of this item has just been hard nerfed. It's hard to really say. It seems a little bugged, or at least not in parity with the patch notes. Cultist Sacrifice has received a pretty massive buff. The actual buff that you get, the fire rate, bonus health, and ability range, will no longer expire on death. And this is because it has a ridiculously long cooldown, so it feels bad to waste this cooldown. You pop Cultist Sacrifice, you die 30 seconds later, and then all of a sudden this item is just a waste of space. So that is a really, really big buff to Cultist Sacrifice. On top of that, they have reduced the duration of the buff from 180 seconds to 170 seconds, and they've also reduced the bonus health from 300 to 275 to compensate. Overall, I would say this item is still way net stronger, because dying and losing your buff really sucks. Escalating Resilience has been buffed pretty severely. They increased the bonus health from 100 up to 125, and they've also made it so that these stacks will last 4 seconds longer, from 20 seconds up to 24 seconds. So it's a lot easier to get that bullet resist, and you get more health for it. Pretty good survival item if you need survival and gun damage at the same time. Express Shot has been nerfed, to no one's surprise. It's only good on a select few characters, but it's really, really good on those characters. So the weapon damage has gone down from 150% down to 125% for that passive there. Headhunter has been nerfed, again, to no one's surprise. The cooldown has been increased from 6 seconds to 8 seconds, so you get the bonus damage and the healing less frequently, and also the weapon damage has gone from 8% down to 5%. Hollow Point and Hunter's Aura have both been slightly buffed in terms of the amount of bullet resist shred that they provide. Hollow Point from 10% up to 12%, and Hunter's Aura from 7% up to 8%. Point Blank also gives even more melee resistance, stacking up on top of Close Quarters, which it upgrades from, so it now gives 30% melee resist, making it actually a pretty good item if you're up against someone like Abrams, so yeah, that's a nice thing to consider. They've also buffed Sharpshooter. So first they buffed Long Range, now they're buffing Sharpshooter by increasing the weapon fall-off range from plus 18% to plus 20%. Very nice. And finally, we have some nerfs to the Spirit-related gun items. So Spirit Rend has its debuff duration reduced from 8 seconds down to 7 seconds, Tesla Bullets has had its damage reduced from 45 down to 40, and Toxic Bullets has had its bleed reduced from 2.6 to 2.5% of the target's max HP. And finally, the Tier 4 items. We have Armor-Piercing Rounds. The chance to actually become unavoidable has been reduced from 65% to 60%. This is a really strong item against characters that have high resistances, so makes sense that they would tone it down a little bit. Capacitor has had 2 small nerfs. The active damage has been reduced from 200 down to 100, and the damage of the actual Tesla Bullets portion has been reduced from 45 down to 40, although again, that's what it says in the patch notes, but in-game here, it clearly looks like the damage is still 45, so I'm not sure what's going on with that. Crushing Fists, the bonus heavy damage has been reduced from 30 down to 25% to bring it in line with melee charge. And they have also reduced the just raw melee damage bonus that you get from 25% down to 20%. Frenzy just got a really interesting change. So, for as long as I can remember, it's provided bullet resist when you're below 50% health, but they just, on a whim, changed it to spirit resist. That's a pretty big change. So, yeah, this might be a much more enticing item now against team comps that have a lot of spirit damage. That is really, really interesting. Glass Cannon has also been buffed. It now gives 8% fire rate per stack instead of 7%. Considering you can accumulate that up to a maximum of 8 times, we're actually looking at a bonus of 8% fire rate here, which is pretty big. They have also increased Lucky Shot's chance to proc from 20% up to 25%, so those gun builds that use these items just got even stronger. Shadow Weave had a pretty big cooldown buff from 48 seconds down to 40 seconds, and finally, Spiritual Overflow, a bit of an interesting change, so the fire rate has been reduced from 40% to 30%, however, the active now gives you 20% bonus ability duration. So you charge this up when you shoot enemy heroes, and once you get that buff online, you get 30 spirit power, 30% fire rate, and 20% ability duration. That's pretty big. This might be a really good item for those builds that sort of do hybrid gun and spirit shenanigans. That's really interesting. That's it for the weapon items. Let's talk about the vitality items. And already, we have some pretty big changes to enduring speed. We're just jumping straight into the tier 2. The tier 1 items haven't really been changed at all. So enduring speed now upgrades from sprint boots again. Yay! It felt really weird that sprint boots didn't upgrade into that. It felt wrong. So yeah, that is pretty nice already, and they've also done a bunch of other changes to account for this. So the move speed has been increased from 1.75 to 2, and it does not grant sprint speed. 2 sprint upgrades to 2 move speed. So if you didn't know, there is actually a difference between sprint speed and move speed. Move speed is just how fast your character moves, period, whereas sprint speed is basically how fast you move when you're not really in combat. So like right now I'm sprinting with Viscous, and if I start shooting this guy, I'm gonna move slower, I'm not sprinting anymore. If I have a higher move speed stat, I'll still move faster when I'm shooting this guy, but if I have a fast sprint speed stat, that only kicks in when I actually start sprinting, which would be now. So, yeah, that is actually a pretty nice buff for Enduring Speed here. Enduring Speed's slow resistance, however, has been reduced from 50% down to 30%. It no longer grants 75 bonus health, but it does now grant +2 out-of-combat regen, so a bit of extra healing. So that's a pretty major shift, and also, just as a reminder, this does still upgrade into Juggernaut. Bullet Lifesteal now gives a little bit of extra health from +70 up to +90, and Debuff Reducer gives slightly less health from 75 down to 50. Enchanter's Emblem gives slightly less out-of-combat regen from 3 to 2, but Guardian Ward now actually provides a pretty sizable range increase from 8% up to 10% bonus ability range. That's actually pretty good. Healing Booster! Oh no, it's been nerfed! This has been a really good item. It upgrades from extra regen, it's super cheap to get online, and it increases the effectiveness of your healing. Now by 20%, previously it was 25%, so this is a bit weaker, and that does actually affect a lot of characters, so pretty big change there. Healing Nova has also been reduced. The heal has been reduced from 300 to 260. However, they have actually pretty greatly buffed the spirit power scaling from 0.93 up to 1.3. That's actually a pretty big change. So if you build up a lot of spirit power, this will scale better into the late game, but you have to initially overcome that nerf of just a flat 40 health regen that really hurts this item in the early game. Reactive Barrier now grants 5% spirit resist on top of the passive effect that, gives you a barrier when you're stunned, so that's pretty good. Restorative Locket also has had its charge up range reduced from 35 meters to 30 meters, and the heal spirit scaling has been reduced from 0.23 to 0.17. I'll be honest, I don't actually know if I've ever seen anyone use this item this patch. I think I saw Holiday use it once, and that's it, so this comes as a bit of a shock to me, but people have been experimenting with so many different items that maybe I've just gotten unlucky, maybe this item was actually too strong, and maybe I just completely missed it. They really want people to use Return Fire. They just reduced the cooldown from 30 seconds down to 25 seconds. I mean, that's pretty cool. Spirit Shielding also now grants 1 move speed after the shield triggers, and the same is true for Weapon Shielding, so both of these items getting a buff. Next we have our Tier 3 items. So both the Bullet and Spirit Resilience items have had their low HP trigger increase from 30% to 35%. That's actually a pretty big buff to both of these armors. You're going to have much more of an opportunity to take advantage of that 60% resistances that they give you. Oh, that's huge. Debuff Remover has also had its move speed buff duration reduced from 4 seconds to 3 seconds. Ouch. Fury Trance has gotten some buffs, as it probably should, because I'm sorry, I hate this item. I really dislike this item, but they have definitely buffed it pretty powerfully here. The bonus health has been doubled from 50 up to 100, and they changed the active bullet resistance to now be spirit resistance, which is arguably much more impactful. I still hate it. It's an item that I have to accept that I'm never going to use because I don't like being silenced, and I especially don't like disabling stamina usage. It's a certain type of item for a certain type of folk, I guess. Life Strike has been nerfed. This is the Tier 3, not the Tier 1. The healing has been reduced from 60% down to 50%. They really just don't like melee, do they? Majestic Leap has also had its cooldown reduced from 32 seconds to 28 seconds, and the barrier has been increased from 300 to 350, so you're more incentivized to use this item now. It was already pretty good on a select few characters, like I can think of, like Pocket, Lash, or shoot, maybe even Warden Majestic Leaping in with his ult like a boss. Time to change the world. So, yeah, that's a pretty powerful buff. Metal Skin's dash distance penalty has been reduced from 25 down to 20, so it's a bit easier to use this item now. Rescue Beam has been nerfed. They reduced the heal from 25% to 20%. That's actually a really big deal. Having a heal that scales on a percent of your life like that, being nerfed so drastically, oof, that's definitely a bit of a problem for Rescue Beam, although it's still going to be a very good item, no doubt. Although that will also stack with the nerf to healing booster, so a lot less healing from this item this patch. Stamina Mastery got a buff. They increased the air jump and dash distance from 25% up to 30%. That's pretty nice. And they also buffed Trophy Collector. Ooh, this is interesting. They increased the max stacks from 14 to 16. So if you have a game that goes longer now, you will get even more of a benefit out of Trophy Collector. Very cool. And finally, Veil Walker actually received a bit of a nerf. The invis duration has been reduced from 7 seconds down to 6 seconds. Alright, let's take a look at the Tier 4 items now. First up, we have some buffs to Cheat Death. This is an item that I was really worried on release would be absurdly overpowered, but I'll be honest, I've barely seen this item, and I think it's because it comes at a really steep cost, and it doesn't provide you anything except the ability to have 4.5 seconds of death immunity, which sounds good, except it does come with a lot of penalties, so it's really kind of tough to use in a weird sort of way. So yeah, they have buffed it to have a half a second longer duration from 4 seconds up to 4.5, and they reduced the cooldown from 130 to just a flat 2 minutes. Healing tempo got nerfed, to no one's surprise. The healing effectiveness has gone down from 30 down to 25%. That is all they've done to this item, though. Infuser has also had its spirit power reduced from 35 down to 30. And Phantom Strike has had its cooldown increase from 30 seconds to 35. So really just a lot of nerfs to these tier 4 items, but it does keep going. So Plated Armor, the on-hit prevention percent has been reduced from 60% down to 50%. So now you're only preventing the on-hit effects specifically. Things like Haze's Fixation, Infernus's DOT, Toxic Bullets, that type of stuff. You now basically just have a coin toss as to whether you actually prevent those hits. Siphon Bullets is one of the rare tier 4 items getting a buff here. So first of all, they changed the bullet resistance over to spirit resistance, and now provides 12% spirit resistance instead of 10% bullet resistance, and they also reduced the cooldown from 0.8 seconds down to 0.7 seconds, so you can get more stacks of health quicker now, which is going to be really good for Mirage, and maybe some other characters, I guess. Finally, Spellbreaker, which is an item that reduces the next instance of high spirit damage you take, has been massively buffed, with a cooldown going from 14 seconds down to 10 seconds. That's actually a really big deal, and this item is superb against characters that do high amounts of bursts, and now it's just even better. It seems to me this patch that they are really clamping down on spirit damage by providing many more ways to get spirit damage reduction. So let's take a look at the spirit items now, and let's see if we can determine why they're doing this, or maybe we'll just have a bunch of nerfs here too. Who knows? Well, first of all, Extra Charge has been buffed, so it now provides +7 bonus power for charged abilities instead of +5, and Mystic Burst has also had its charge-up time reduced from 14 seconds to 12 seconds, so you get a bit more early game value out of these items. Mystic Regeneration no longer scales with Spirit Power, but it does now upgrade into a new Tier 3 spirit item known as Radiant Regeneration, which you can see down here. So let's take a look at that. Radiant Regeneration. Dealing spirit damage to enemy heroes grants you bonus health regen, stacks when dealing damage to different heroes, and this gives 5 health regeneration, and it does scale with spirit power, as opposed to Mystic Regen, which is 4 HP without the spirit scaling. And this also has a passive with a 6-second cooldown that allows you to heal and gain bonus movement speed for 3 seconds when you cast an ability, 100 healing and +2 meters per second of move speed. You'll notice that this seems very similar to the buff that Boundless Spirit provided. And that's because it doesn't do that anymore. Boundless Spirit is now just a spirit item, and Radiant Regeneration has taken the place of its new healing and move speed effect. So, very interesting item now, and it's a pretty good way to get a lot of health regeneration if you're playing someone who does spirit damage, especially consistent spirit damage. Arcane Surge has been nerfed. Again, to no one's surprise. I mean, this ability was insane. 20% ability range, 20% ability duration, and a bunch of spirit power on your next ability? That basically takes the place of freaking Mystic Expansion and Duration Extender, and it gives you stamina, and it gives you spirit power. I mean, just so many things in one item. So they nerfed it. It's now 15% ability range and duration. So that's all they did, but still, definitely a well-needed nerf, I will tell you that. Bullet Resist Shredder has also been buffed. The duration has gone up from 6 seconds up to 8 seconds. Cold Front has had its cooldown buff from 30 seconds down to 24 seconds. That's actually a pretty big deal. Ooh. And Compress cooldown has also been buffed. The imbued cooldown reduction has been increased from 18% to 22%. Duration Extender, very similar thing. They buffed the duration from 20% up to 22%. A lot of buffs here. And, well, finally there is one nerf. Quicksilver Reload has had its charge-up time increased from 16 seconds to 18 seconds, but, you know, Quicksilver Reload is really strong, so that is absolutely fair enough. But overall, so far we're seeing a lot of buffs to these spirit items. Now let's move on to the tier 3 items, where we do start with a nerf to Decay. 2 nerfs, actually. The damage has been reduced from 2.75% down to 2.5%. And the cooldown has been increased from 24 seconds up to 30 seconds. So Decay is really hurting. I'm pretty sure they also nerfed it in the previous balance patch, so they've really done a lot to hurt Decay. Rapid Recharge, however, has been buffed. Where is Rapid Recharge? Actually, there it is. So its charged spirit power has gone up from 10 to 16, so even more spirit power for these charged abilities. That is awesome. Silence Wave, however, has had its cooldown increase from 28 seconds to 30 seconds, and they reduced the duration of the silence from 4 seconds to 3.75 seconds. So, a bit of a nerf to this, but it is a pretty powerful item. Surge of Power has had its spirit power increase from 22 up to 25. That's pretty nice. Tank Buster, however, has received 2 nerfs, and this has been a really powerful item. So, again, not super surprising. The damage has gone down from 7% down to 6%, and the charge-up time has increased from 8 to 12 seconds. Honestly, the charge-up time might hurt more than the damage nerf, because it means you'll have this much less consistently, and especially once you get a lot of cooldown reduction on certain abilities, yeah, you're not going to have this as consistently, so that is a pretty big deal. Finally, Torment Pulse has actually received a bit of a buff, so the bonus health has gone up from 110 to 125. It's small, but it is a buff. Finally, let's talk about the Tier 4 items. There's a lot to talk about here. So the cooldown of Arctic Blast now mirrors the cooldown of Cold Front. It has also gone from 30 seconds down to 24 seconds, making this even more enticing. Boundless Spirit no longer heals and grants movement speed on ability casts, but it now provides... look at this! Plus 10% spirit power. That's just, hey, whatever spirit power you have, here's 10% more on top of that. It really encourages you to stack up a very high base value of spirit power, because then you just get a whopper of a bonus on top of that. And they have also, to compensate, reduced the spirit power it provides from 40 down to 35. But still, that is a pretty big change to Boundless Spirit. Echo Shard is actually, wow, it's gotten buffed? Wow, wasn't expecting that. The cooldown has been reduced from 35 seconds down to 30 seconds. Hey, as an avid Echo Shard user for my Double Bomb Lady Geist build and for my Viscous support build and numerous other things, I'll take it. Hey, I like that. Escalating Exposure has also received some changes. The Spirit Amp per stack has increased from 4% to 4.5%. However, the max stacks have reduced from 14 to 12. So I pulled out my calculator to figure out the new ramping, and it turns out that, yeah, the previous ramping would have gotten you 56% Spirit Amp. The new ramping gets you 54% Spirit Amp, so 2% less. But you do build it up faster, because if we take a look at the cooldown, it's 0.7 seconds. So to get max stacks online, it now saves you 1.4 seconds of time. That's actually a pretty big deal for DOT builds like Infernus or Seven or Pocket, etc. Ethereal Shift's cooldown has gone from 24 seconds down to 22 seconds. That's pretty nice. However, the cooldown of Focus Lens has been nerfed from 27 seconds to 28 seconds. It's a pretty powerful item. It silences them and it does a bunch of damage to them, so a little bit of a cooldown nerf is expected. Mercurial Magnum has had a charge-up time nerf from 10 seconds to 14 seconds. That's pretty beefy. But again, this has been a very powerful item, so I definitely understand why they've done that. Finally, let's take a look at Scourge and Spirit Burn, two very popular items ever since the patch dropped. Scourge had its damage reduced from 3.5% down to 3.25%, according to the patch notes. However, in the game here, I don't know if you can see it behind me, it does 3%. So, yeah, I don't know what's up with the slight parity inconsistencies here between the patch notes and the game, but it seems like Scourge has been nerfed a little bit more than what they said in the patch notes. Very powerful item though, so yeah, definitely understand why they did that. Spirit Burn has also had its damage threshold increase from 400 to 500. That's going to be a lot harder to proc this update, not just because of the damage threshold, but also because it, yeah, there's a lot more spirit damage reduction now, as you notice from some of the previous item changes. So if they are actually stacking up that spirit damage reduction, then yeah, that threshold is going to be even harder to hit. So yeah, that is definitely a pretty powerful nerf to Spirit Burn. And that concludes everything in this update. Geez, how long have I been talking here? Holy crap, this is a 45-minute long video. I don't know how long it's going to be by the time I edit it down, but yeah, there's a lot of changes here. So let me know what you think about all the changes in the comments section down below. Tried to be thorough and cover everything here, so that way you know what to expect in the new Deadlock patch. The highlights, of course, we have a bunch of small item tweaks. We also have a brand new item here in the Spirit section. We have a couple of hero changes, and we also have some adjustments to the map. So overall, this is an update filled with a lot of tweaks. nothing is really a major standout crazy change, although again, maybe besides the new item, of course, that's pretty exciting. But yeah, small tweaks are pretty good. We want to refine the meta and change the items to make it as balanced as possible. So I'm really looking forward to testing out this new update, and I hope you are too. But yeah, if you guys have enjoyed this video, you enjoyed my coverage of it, make sure to drop a like down below, and again, subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content from me. It's free, it helps out the channel a ton. And yeah, with all that being said, thank you guys for watching. I will see you all next time. Peace out.